Hello, and welcome once again to DK Reads a Freakin' Book, I, Jedi, Chapter 17, written for you by Michael Stackpole, read for you, and lightly discussed, and I mean lightly discussed, sometimes interrupting the story, by me, DK. Chapter 17. Let's go! Of course, my best was nothing compared to Kip Duran's best. Kip's growth in the Force was nothing shy of incredible. In just over a week, he surpassed anything the rest of us were doing by light years. Master Skywalker didn't know what to do with him. He was so good. Kip gave us hope that reestablishing the Jedi Order could be and would be done. I tried to get to know Kip, but he kept himself aloof and apart from me. He made other friends among us. Dorsk 81, the yellow-fleshed clone from Calm, had been closer to Gantoris than most, and Kip's friendship filled a void in his life. They spent a fair amount of time together, heading off into the surrounding jungle as a survey team all by themselves. Kip had grown up in the spice mines of Kessel and was very strong in the Force. Growing up in prison made him hold himself very close, and he didn't take to prying into his life. My attempts to open him up just drove him away from me, so I backed off. I didn't want to do anything that would make getting to know him impossible later, and it wasn't as if I didn't have other things to do. Gantoris had been dead for over 2 weeks, and I was really no closer to finding out who or what had killed him than when the smoke was still curling off of his body. I still felt we had a sociopathic killer on Yavin 4, but no one had found any clues of someone lurking here. We had Gantoris' body, but his killer had vanished without a trace. The holocron was not much more help in solving the murder, but it did give us some planetary history to work from. Yavin 4, it turned out, had been the seat of power of a formidable Dark Lord of the Sith, a fallen Jedi known as Exar Kun. Now, I listened to the audiobook of this a long time ago, and the guy who read it, I remember this, pronounced it Exar Kun. It's E-X-A-R-K-U-N. Kun. I think it's Exar Kun, but he said Kun. Exar Kun. So, I don't know, you tell me what you like better. I'm going to go with Exar Kun. He had been seduced to the dark side when he studied the ways of the Sith and incorporated their magics into the manipulation of the Force. He had come to Yavin 4 and had enslaved the Massassi people. He used them to create all the temples on the world to help focus his power. Only when the Jedi from the Old Republic came after him in what became known as the Sith War was he defeated, and his evil expunged from the galaxy for all time. Luke's admonition about the dark side when he saw Gantoris' body made me wonder if, somehow, Gantoris had managed to dig up, decipher, and study some Sith artifacts or manuals. Somewhere, he had learned to make a lightsaber. I didn't want to think one of the Emperor's dark Jedi had managed to slip onto Yavin 4 and was tutoring students. Figuring that Gantoris had gotten himself in trouble was a more pleasant alternative theory. But fortunately for my peace of mind, the idea of Gantoris' body being a taunt and a challenge fit all too well patterns I had seen before. My father had always told me to follow my gut. He'd really been encouraging my reliance on the Force, so I started with the assumption that an active intelligence had instructed Gantoris and then killed him. The problem with that assumption remained the same as it had always been. If such a person existed, Master Skywalker should have detected him. A droid doing the teaching would explain why we didn't detect him in the network of life on Yavin 4. A droid might even have the knowledge to teach Gantoris, but since it could not manipulate the Force, the lessons learned would be relatively useless. Off the other edge of the scale, we had the possibility of someone so powerful in the Force that he could remain undetected even by a master. Gantoris' Dark Man, and the person in Master Luke's nightmare, could fit that profile. Putting Exar Kun at the top of the list of suspects was easy. He'd certainly not have balked at roasting Gantoris alive, but he'd been dead for 4,000 years. Master Luke had alluded to the idea that he had seen and spoken with Obi-Wan Kenobi after the Jedi Master had been killed, but within a decade after his death, Obi-Wan had gone away forever. A Dark Lord of the Sith might have more staying power than that, but 4 millennia? Now, since this book has been written, well, spoilers for Episode 7, you do hear Obi-Wan Kenobi's voice say, "Rey! Hey, Rey!" He's, "Hello there." He says some things to Rey. I don't remember. I think he just says, "Rey." I think that's it. But yeah, so his voice is heard. I don't know if that counts the same, but this book is implying that after a certain amount of time, their force power diminishes and they just go away or something. In addition to working with Tion to uncover more data about the Jedi, I got to spend more time with Cam learning how to use a lightsaber. We managed to expand my sphere of responsibility up to 16 meters for fine control, which meant I could pretty much own a city block. If I focused in one direction, I was good up to 250 meters for fine control on picking off blaster bolts, or line of sight for sensing presence. In one experiment, I implanted a vision of dinner being served in Dorsk 81's mind, summoning him and Kip back from one of their hikes, though they were still half a kilometer away. I tried to get into Kip's mind on that occasion, but I didn't know him well enough to break through. That confirmed one of my theories about who I could and could not influence. The better I knew someone, the more receptive they seemed to be to my projections. If they were hostile or unknown to me, and/or the image was terribly complex, I had a lot of trouble making them see anything. After a particularly grueling day, I ended up lounging around with the rest of the students in the early evening. We'd spent half the day listening to one of the auxiliary holocron gatekeepers spin stories of court intrigues in the Old Republic. Intrigues that must have been fascinating when you knew who he was talking about, but the gatekeeper's stunning inability to characterize anyone meant that I lost track of what was going on almost immediately. After that, another gatekeeper told the story of how Yoda had become a Jedi. That story was actually pretty good, and undoubtedly saved my life because a minute more of the Old Republic stories and I'd have slipped into a coma. After that, I went on a 10-kilometer run just to convince myself I was, in fact, alive. Oh, this story about how Yoda becomes a Jedi, but no details at all. Yeah, it was a great story. I wish you could have heard it. The Academy personnel had all gathered in one of the larger seminar rooms on the second level to listen to one of Tion's latest ballads. I knew she had drawn it from material we had researched together, but she promised it was not a halcyon ballad, so I was willing to come listen. Actually, I'd have come listen even if she were singing about Old Republic court intrigues, because when her voice filled the room, there was no question about it. You were very much alive. She accompanied herself on a unique instrument that had 2 resonating boxes mounted on a shaft. Strings ran over the boxes, allowing her to pluck or strum them. The arrangement almost made the instrument sound like 2 separate instruments, and her skill with it brought it close to being orchestral. Most of her ballads, like the new one, the Ballad of Nomi Sunrider, had a stately lyrical theme running beneath them. Occasionally, Tion would also break into a slightly more raucous tune that usually got me to hum along. Nomi Sunrider's ballad came from the era of Exar Kun in the Sith War. She was a woman whose husband had been slain, so she took his place in a Jedi training cadre. She went on to become an acclaimed Jedi who played a key role in the Sith War. Singing about her might have been considered sacrilege in the Great Temple of Yavin 4, but I didn't think anyone would protest the fact after 4,000 years. I was wrong. Halfway through the song, Kip got up from the floor, his face contorted with disgust. I wish you wouldn't perpetuate that ridiculous story. Nomi Sunrider was a victim. She fought in the Sith War without ever knowing what the battles were about. She listened blindly to her Jedi masters, who were afraid because Exar Kun had discovered a way for the Jedi to expand their power. Tion set her instrument down, surprised and a little hurt. She asked Kip why he hadn't helped her reconstruct that legend if he had special information like that. Luke asked him where he'd learned what he'd just said, but that question had already answered itself in my gut. Exar Kun. I'd been there with Tion as we listened to Bodo Baas talk about the Sith War. Kip's take on it was decidedly pro-Exar Kun, and as nearly as we've been able to discover, there were no minority opinions on the subject available from the holocron. I came out of my reverie as Kip's blazing gaze brushed past my own. They wouldn't all have been slaughtered. The Jedi would never have fallen, and we wouldn't be here, taught by someone who doesn't know any more than we do. Luke again asked Kip where he had learned his history. The young man hesitated for a moment, then mumbled something about having used the holocron. I shot Tion a glance and she frowned. Between the lessons we'd all learned from it, and the work she was doing with it, unless Kip was an insomniac, he really didn't have time to study it. Before I could call him on that lie, Master Skywalker's R2 unit rolled into the room and whistled at him. I caught a bit of the code for incoming, and stretched out with my senses. Even before Luke announced to us that we had a visitor, I caught a sense of a powerful force presence descending toward the moon. By the time we left the Great Temple, a Z-95 headhunter was setting down on the landing grid. The pilot emerged, wearing a silvery, form-fitting flight suit. She removed her helmet and shook out red-gold hair. Even in the twilight, I noticed the green of her eyes, lighter and more striking than mine. She looked quite beautiful, though the smile she gave Master Skywalker seemed to rest uncomfortably on her lips. Mara Jade, Luke greeted her. Now, if you're a fan of the Expanded Universe, you probably know a lot about Mara Jade. She's in a ton of stories and eventually goes on to be Luke's wife. I believe they have some children together. Spoilers. I don't know if that's too big of a spoiler to say here, but I just said it, so there you go. I forget. I don't think they're like together in this story. I don't remember. I think this is as they're, like, they're just like Netflix and chilling, I think. HoloNet and chill. Something like that. I missed her reply as the uneasiness I felt over Kip suddenly became compounded. Ayala had told me about this Mara Jade. She had been groomed by the Emperor to be an agent who was adept in the use of the Force. Her very existence had been unknown to all but a handful of Imperials, and she would have remained hidden save for her role in defeating Grand Admiral Thrawn. Details on that were all very sketchy, but I'd been left with the impression that she was very competent, very lethal, and not that positively disposed toward Jedi. Yeah, that's in the book, the Thrawn trilogy, the original Thrawn trilogy by Timothy Zahn. If you just look him up, those books are awesome. Those are some of the best. Like those should have been the sequels. I've always thought that they should have filmed those as the sequels to the original trilogy. They're great. I highly recommend it. If you can't read the book, if you don't have time, there is an audiobook or there's a comic series that's very good that gets most of the point across. Although the book is, of course, the best. Very highly recommended. It ties into this a little bit. Despite that, she pulled from a pouch at her side a Jedi cloak. Luke smiled and turned as he presented her to us. This is Mara Jade. She has come here to learn the ways of the Jedi. Everyone applauded her, even Kip, though he remained sullen. Luke apparently noticed that as easily as I did, because he waved me over. Kieran, will you please see to Mara's billeting? I have something to which I want to attend, if you don't mind. She gave him a quick nod, then turned and regarded me up and down. Have we met before? I knew we had not, but I still found something disturbingly familiar about her. No, I don't think so. Odd. I usually don't forget a face. And I think I would remember you. I waved her toward the great temple. We have a variety of rooms ready. Master Skywalker's chambers are on the 3rd level. Likewise, some of the students. Most visitors are housed on the 2nd level. I felt tendrils of the Force snake out from her and probe the fringes of my mind. But that's not where you live. I concentrated for a nanosecond and shut her out of my mind. No. I was attracted to the old pirate billets on the ground floor. Mara Jade smiled, and I found it all too predatory for me. Then I'll look there first for a place to stay, if you don't mind. Mine is not to mind, but to obey the wishes of my master. She clapped her hands mockingly. Oh, very good. Spoken like an obsequious imperial courtier. I gave her a quick smile as we entered the great temple. Glad to make you feel at home. That remark brought her head up. The Empire's dead. But not all loyalties to it. She stopped in the middle of the hangar floor, and I noticed her spacesuit had shifted to darker, flatter colors to blend in with the surroundings. You said we'd not met, but you clearly have a problem with me. Shall we settle it now? The narrowed stare she gave me was pure fire, and one smile from me. I was just about to rise to her challenge and let her have a catalog of hideous things the Empire had done, beginning with the death of the Jedi Knights and working on up to Gantoris' murder, when sense kicked back in. Here I was, standing in the middle of the place from which a desperate strike at the Empire had been launched. It had succeeded. I had been part of subsequent attacks against the Empire, attacks that brought it to its knees and took away its capital world, Coruscant. I had helped destroy the Empire that had been her home, and there was no reason why she shouldn't long for things from her past as much as I did. I drew in a deep breath, held it, then slowly exhaled it. Please, forgive my being rude. It's very easy, when things are not going as planned, to trace the fault back to the Empire. You are not the Empire. To accuse you of loyalties or sympathies is unfair and probably stupid. Not the first time I've been either, but I try not to do both with people I've just met. I extended my hand to her. I am Corran Horn. My true name almost caught in my throat, but offering it to her came as a sign of trust. Luke clearly trusted her, and my gut told me I should do the same. Mara Jade shook my hand and looked me over again. I've heard of you. I apologize for the probe. I knew you were familiar, but the name Kieran didn't fit. I didn't know why. Since I sensed no deception from Luke, Master Skywalker, I wondered if he knew you were here under a lie. He suggested it, I smiled. In many ways, I think he thinks of me as Kieran Halcyon. Seems Kieran Halcyon was an ancestor of mine and a Jedi of some note in the Corellian system. I see. The smile on her face slowly died, and I sensed her closing toward me. I didn't know why, and was fairly certain I could have tried to probe her for eons without getting so much as a sign of life from her. Part of me wanted to once again become very suspicious, but I kept that side of myself at bay. I had decided to trust her, so I trusted her. That might have seemed stupid, but it felt very right. Master Skywalker felt I should attend the academy under this alias so I wouldn't distract the students. And there were other reasons you didn't want to attract attention? Why would you ask that? Your father-in-law is Booster Tarek. Mara Jade let the bearish shadow of a smile tug at the corners of her mouth. That's reason enough for anyone to go into hiding. I don't seem to recall having heard anything of Mirax for 6 weeks or so. You've been here, what, a month? And you wonder if I murdered her and have come here to hide? No. Mara's words came cold and solemn. I wondered if someone else murdered her and you're here learning how to find them. Her hitting so close to the mark sent a jolt through me. How is it that you know how long ago anyone heard about my wife? She shrugged easily as we passed into the back corridor leading to the old pirates' quarters. She's very good at what she does, you know. As a smuggler, she's easily in the 95th percentile in finding exotic goods and finding buyers for them. Talon Card still talks about the Sith Flanvarak that she enabled him to unload. When someone like her drops out for more than a couple of weeks, either they're up to something big or they're dead. I flicked on the glow lamps in the small room. This room belonged to a female rebel pilot. She died before the Death Star battle. Mara took a quick look around the room, then nodded. It'll suit me. So what happened to Mirax? She's alive, but that's all I know. I leaned against the door jamb. Master Skywalker and Wedge think she was kidnapped for reasons unknown. They think someone has her in hibernation. She's out there, somewhere. The fire-haired woman folded her arms across her chest. And you're here learning what you can so you can find her. Find her and save her. Mara nodded. Lucky woman. I hope so. I'll let my voice descend into a growl. If she's not, if I arrive too late, her captors are going to find all the luck in the galaxy won't do them any good. End of chapter 17. Oh man, Corrin's out for blood. So what did we learn in this chapter? Well, Kip Duran is clearly under the influence of, the Dark Man. And we got some heavy evidence that it's this XR Kun fella, but he's been dead for 4,000 years. So I don't think that makes any sense. I guess we'll have to read on to discover the true secrets of this book, I, Jedi, by Michael Stackpole. Read for you by me, DK. Also, we got Mara Jade. She's a cool character. She's in a lot of the books and such. She's a interesting character, and I forgot she was even in this book, to be honest with you. So that shows how much I remember. Any Hoosers, go on and get you some Star Wars. Just watch a Star Wars movie, or I don't know, watch Rogue One. When's the last time you saw that? That'll get you in the mood. Borgullet will know the truth. Do a little Borgullet. Do some Borgullet, and I gotta go. Catch you in the next chapter, and may the Force be with you.